"I remember every detail," said the orphan girl in the courtroom. The lawyer laughed, but soon was surprised. Emily Johnson never imagined that at 11 years old she would be at the center of a legal battle that would divide an entire family. The little orphan had lost her adoptive mother just 3 months earlier, but now found herself forced to fight for something much bigger than her own pain. It was when she stood up, trembling before the microphone, and said with a firm voice, "I remember every detail of that night." The opposing lawyer, Richard Peterson, let out a mocking laugh, signaling for her to continue with what he called a childish little show. "Your Honor," said Richard with a broad smile on his face, "we cannot waste time with a child's fantasies. An 11-year-old girl cannot have reliable memory about such important documents." Judge Margaret Williams raised her hand, asking for silence. She had seen many cases in her 20-year career, but something about that child caught her attention. The girl didn't cry, didn't scream, she just stood there, steady as a rock. "Continue, dear," said the judge gently. "Tell us what you remember." Emily took a deep breath. Her adoptive mother, Sarah Thompson, had worked as a nurse at Mercy General Hospital for 15 years. She was a simple woman who lived in a small house in the Oakwood Heights neighborhood in Rochester. When Sarah passed away from heart complications, no one from the family showed up at the funeral. "My mother always told me she had a rich sister in New York City," began Emily, "but that they hadn't spoken in over 10 years because of a nasty fight. The rich aunt in question was Barbara Thompson Wilson, owner of 2 pharmacies in the Upper East Side of New York City. Barbara had married a successful businessman and never looked back. When she found out her sister had left a house and some savings, she immediately appeared claiming to be the only legitimate heir. "But I know there is a letter," continued Emily, her voice gaining strength. "My mother wrote leaving everything to the Golden Years Senior Home, where she did volunteer work every weekend." Richard rolled his eyes and stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Where is this supposed letter? There is no document registered with the court. This child is making up stories to benefit an institution that is probably manipulating her." "The letter does exist," insisted Emily. "My mother hid it inside Grandma Ruth's recipe book on the second shelf in the kitchen. She showed me where she kept it and said that one day I would understand why." Barbara, who had remained silent in her chair until then, shifted uncomfortably. She was a 52-year-old woman, always well-dressed, with perfectly styled hair and manicured nails. Unlike her sister, who dedicated her life to others, Barbara always thought of herself first. "That's impossible," said Barbara, standing up. "I already emptied out my sister's entire house. There was no letter. I sold all the furniture to pay off the debts she left." Emily's expression changed. For the first time, her hands trembled slightly. "You sold everything? Even Grandma Ruth's recipe book?" "Everything," confirmed Barbara coldly. "My sister lived in debt. Someone had to be practical and resolve the situation." Richard smiled, satisfied, thinking he had won the case. But Emily didn't give up. "It's not a problem," said the girl, surprising everyone. "I memorized the entire letter when my mother read it to me out loud. She always did that when she wrote important things, said that 2 heads are better than 1. "Oh, now the child has a photographic memory," mocked Richard. "How convenient. Your Honor, this is clearly an attempt at fraud. A child cannot memorize a complex legal document." But Emily had already begun to recite, "I, Sarah Thompson Wilson, American single nurse, holder of ID number 25.847.9634, declare that I leave all my material possessions to Golden Years Senior Home, located at 237 Maple Avenue, Riverside District, Rochester, New York City." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Emily continued reciting for 2 more minutes, including specific details about bank accounts, document numbers, and even the date the letter was written. Richard had stopped laughing. His confident expression began to give way to growing concern. That still proves nothing," he stammered. "The child could have been trained by someone at the home to memorize this text." "I wasn't trained by anyone," Emily replied calmly, "and I can prove it. Mr. Richard, weren't you present when my mother lay in the hospital for the last time?" "Me? No, of course not. I never saw your mother before she passed away." Then how do you know that she told the night shift nurse she was worried because she hadn't registered the letter with the notary? You were in the hallway talking to Aunt Barbara when she said that. Richard visibly paled. Barbara looked at him in astonishment. That's impossible, murmured Richard. How could you know that? Because I was there, Emily replied simply. I pretended to sleep in the chair next to my mother's bed, but I heard the whole conversation. You told Aunt Barbara that if there were no registered documents, it would be easy to prove that everything should go to the Blood family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Judge Margaret leaned forward, clearly interested. In her 20 years presiding over hearings, she had developed a sharp instinct for detecting lies. And everything about Emily suggested she was telling the truth. Continue, Emily, encouraged the judge. What else did you hear in that conversation? Mr. Richard said he knew a doctor who could attest that my mother wasn't in full possession of her mental faculties when she wrote any document. He said that heart medications can cause mental confusion. Richard stood up abruptly, knocking over some papers. This is an absurd slander. This child is making all this up. Then explain how she knew about our private conversation, said Barbara, for the first time looking at the lawyer with suspicion. Richard, you told me you had never set foot in that hospital before. It might have been a coincidence. A coincidence? Emily interrupted him. You also talked with Dr. Anderson in the elevator about how common it is for families to fight over inheritance and how the cleverest always come out on top. You said you had already won several cases like that. Dr. Anderson was present at the hearing as a witness regarding Sarah's mental state. He stood up, visibly disturbed. It's true, confirmed the doctor. I remember that conversation perfectly. I was quite uncomfortable at the time, but thought it was just an unfortunate remark. Richard was becoming desperate. His carefully laid plans were crumbling before an 11-year-old child. Even if all this is true, he said, trying to regain control, we still don't have the original letter. A child's memory has no legal value, no matter how detailed it is. Emily smiled for the first time since she began speaking. I know where the original letter is. Everyone in the courtroom turned to her in total silence. When my mother realized she was very ill, she gave me a small copper key. She said that if anything happened to her, I should give it to the director of the home, Mrs. Dorothy. A key for what? Asked the judge. For the safe deposit box at the First Community Bank on the main avenue. My mother was always careful with important documents. She said the safe deposit box was the safest place to keep things that couldn't be lost. Barbara and Richard exchanged nervous glances. Neither of them knew about the existence of a safe deposit box. This is very convenient, said Richard, but his voice no longer sounded confident. How do we know you're not making this up too? Because I remember the account number, replied Emily. Number 45,789, branch 0234. My mother made me repeat it many times to make sure I wouldn't forget. The judge made a note. We'll verify this immediately. Officer, contact First Community Bank and confirm whether there's a safe deposit box registered under Sarah Thompson's name. While they waited for confirmation, Richard tried a new strategy. Your Honor, even if there is a safe deposit box, an 11-year-old child has no legal standing to access it. Only direct family members or legal representatives can open deceased persons' safe deposit boxes. Actually, said Emily calmly, my mother named me as an official witness in the document. She said I was the only person she trusted completely. How can a child be an official witness? Protested Richard. According to the United States Civil Code, intervened the judge, minors under 16 can serve as witnesses in specific situations, especially when expressly appointed by the testator and when there are other documents proving the validity of the designation. 20 minutes later, the officer returned with confirmation. The safe deposit box existed and had been registered under Sarah Thompson's name since 2 years before her passing. The director of the senior home, Mrs. Dorothy Miller, is on her way, informed the officer. She'll bring the key that the girl gave her as instructed. Richard was visibly shaken. All his arguments were falling apart one by one before Emily's impressive memory precision. Still, He tried one last time. We can't be sure what's in the safe deposit box. It could be anything. I know exactly what's in the safe deposit box, said Emily. Besides the original letter, there are 3 CDs with recordings my mother made explaining her decisions. She always said it was important to make everything very clear to avoid fights after she was gone. Barbara shifted in her chair. For the first time since entering the courtroom, she seemed genuinely shaken. Recordings, she murmured. What kind of recordings? My mother talked about our family, about how she never understood why you distanced yourself after you got married. She cried sometimes when recording, especially when talking about how she missed her sister. Tears began to form in Barbara's eyes. She had built a wall of coldness over the years, but something in Emily's sincere voice was cracking that protection. She talked about me? Yes, she did. She said you were very smart and that she was sure you'd one day understand why she chose to help the seniors at the home. My mother always said that true wealth was in caring for others. Richard realized he was losing his client. Barbara's coldness was giving way to an emotion he couldn't manipulate. Barbara, don't let yourself be carried away by sentimentality, he said sharply. Remember what we came here for. But his words sounded empty and cruel in the courtroom's emotionally charged silence. At that moment, the courtroom door opened and Mrs. Dorothy Miller entered accompanied by the officer. She was a 65-year-old lady, grey hair tied in a simple bun, wearing a navy blue suit that spoke of simplicity but dignity. Her eyes sparkled when she saw Emily. "My dear child," she said, approaching, "how are you holding up through all this?" "I'm all right, Mrs. Dorothy," replied Emily. "Did you bring the key?" "Yes, I did," the elderly woman confirmed, taking a small copper key from her pocket. "Your mother explained everything to me in her final days. She said if anything happened, you would come to me, and I would know what to do." The judge examined the key. "Let's go to the bank right now. I want everyone present to witness the opening of the safe, so there are no doubts about its contents." The group headed to First Community Bank, which was just 3 blocks from the courthouse. Emily walked between Mrs. Dorothy and the judge, while Barbara and Richard followed them in tense silence. At the bank, the manager Michael Reynolds personally received them. He had known Sarah for years and was visibly emotional upon learning the purpose of their visit. "Mrs. Sarah was a very special client," he said, as he led them to the vault. "Always punctual with payments, always polite. We were very saddened to hear of her passing." "Did you know about the contents of the safe?" asked the judge. "Not directly, but she mentioned once that she was keeping important documents to ensure her final wishes would be respected. She said there were people who would try to question her decisions." Richard swallowed hard. It was as if Sarah had foreseen exactly what was happening. The safe was opened with Emily's key and the bank's key. Inside, they found exactly what the girl had described. The original letter carefully folded inside a sealed envelope, 3 CDs with handwritten labels, and a folder with other documents. The judge examined the letter first. The handwriting was clearly Sarah's, and the document was signed and dated 2 years before her passing. Every word confirmed exactly what Emily had recited from memory. "The content is identical to what the girl reproduced," confirmed the judge. "Every detail, every comma." Richard made one last desperate attempt. "We can still question the deceased's mental state at the time of writing." "Richard, stop," said Barbara suddenly. Everyone turned to her, surprised by the firmness in her voice. "Enough of this. Barbara, you can't." "I said enough," she shouted, startling everyone. "You promised me it would be a simple case, that my sister hadn't left anything organized. But it was all organized, wasn't it? She knew I would come after the inheritance." Tears began to stream down Barbara's face. "My sister was always smarter than me, more generous than me. And even after everything I did, she still cared enough to protect me from this situation." "What are you talking about?" asked Emily, genuinely confused. Barbara wiped her tears and turned to the girl. "Sweetheart, there's something you need to know about your mother and our family. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Your mother and I didn't argue over something silly, like I said. We fought because I blamed her for something terrible that happened in our family 12 years ago. The bank manager suggested they move to a private room. The group settled around a conference table as Barbara gathered the courage to continue. Our parents died in a car accident when I was 28 and Sarah was 25. They left the same house where Sarah lived with you, plus some savings. It wasn't much, but it was all we had. Emily listened intently, learning details about her family that her mother had never shared. I had just married Howard and was starting my life. I wanted to sell the house and split the money so we could each go our separate ways, but Sarah refused. She said the house was our history, that our parents wanted us to keep it in the family. "And you fought over that?" asked Emily. "Not just that," continued Barbara, her voice growing weaker. "At the time, I had been trying to get pregnant for 2 years without success. Howard was getting impatient, suggesting that maybe I had some problem. I was desperate to prove I could be a mother." Mrs. Dorothy discreetly held Emily's hand, sensing the story was about to take a painful turn. 2 years after our parents passed, Sarah came to me. She had found you. "What do you mean, found?" asked Emily, confused. "You weren't a baby when you came into Sarah's life. You were 3.5 years old. Your birth mother had abandoned you at a health clinic where Sarah worked as a volunteer. The girl was malnourished, scared, and wouldn't speak to anyone." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She knew she was adopted but had never asked about the details. "Sarah fell in love with you immediately. She said you were the gift she had asked God for. But to adopt you officially, she needed to prove financial stability and adequate housing. And she came to ask you for help." "She did. Sarah asked me to give up my share of our parents' house so she could prove she had a stable home for you. In return, she would give up any claim to the remaining savings." Barbara stopped to take a deep breath before continuing. "I said no." The silence in the room was heavy. Emily tried to process what she was hearing. "Why?" "Because I was blinded by jealousy and anger. There was my sister, who had always been the good one in the family, being gifted with a beautiful, smart daughter, while I was desperately struggling to get pregnant. It seemed so unfair." Tears streamed down Barbara's face again. "I told Sarah that if she wanted a daughter, she should find a way to do it on her own. That I wasn't going to sacrifice my financial future for her dreams." "And what happened?" asked Emily quietly. "Your mother sold everything of value she had. Our parents' antique furniture, our grandmother's jewelry, even her car. She gathered the money, bought my share of the house at market value, and never spoke to me again." Mrs. Dorothy shook her head sadly. "Sarah told me this story years later. She said it was the hardest time of her life, but that she didn't regret it for a second." "Why did my mother never tell me this?" asked Emily. "Because she loved you too much to let you grow up angry with me," answered Barbara. "Even after everything I did, she didn't want you to carry that burden." Richard, who had remained silent until then, watching his client emotionally unravel, tried to intervene. "Barbara, remember we came here to resolve a legal matter, not to confess feelings." "Shut up, Richard," she said with a firmness no one expected. "You convinced me that I had a right to this inheritance because I was blood family, but I was never this girl's family. Sarah was. The senior home was. I was just a selfish person who turned my back when I was needed." Barbara turned to Emily. "Honey, I came here today thinking only about the money, but hearing you speak with so much love about your mother, seeing how she prepared you for this moment, I realize she was far richer than I will ever be." "You don't have to say that just because you feel guilty," said Emily with surprising maturity. "My mother always said people do the best they can with what they know at the time." "Your mother was wise," said Barbara, smiling for the first time. "Wiser than I deserved to recognize." The judge, who had been silently observing the entire conversation, spoke up. "Well, considering we have the original documentation here, proving Sarah Thompson's last wishes, and given that the contestant herself has withdrawn her objection, I believe we can close this matter." "Wait," said Barbara. "There's one thing I need to do first." She went to the document folder that had been found in the safe and opened it. Inside were several sheets of paper in Sarah's handwriting. "May I?" she asked the judge, who agreed. Barbara flipped through the papers until she found what she was looking for. It was a letter addressed to her. "May I read it aloud?" she asked. "If you feel comfortable," replied the judge. Barbara unfolded the paper with trembling hands and began to read. "My dear sister Barbara, if you're reading this, it means I've passed on and you decided to contest my decision about the inheritance. I'm not angry with you for that. In fact, I always knew that would be your first reaction." Barbara's voice faltered for a moment before continuing. "I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, even after our fight. I know you made that decision driven by the pain of not being able to have children, not out of malice. I hope one day you understand that Emily was the greatest gift life gave me, and that she was worth every sacrifice." Everyone in the room was visibly moved. Even Richard had stopped shuffling papers and was listening attentively. "If you're reading this with Emily by your side, I ask you to look at her closely. See how she's grown up strong, intelligent, and kind. This girl is our family just as much as anyone connected to us by blood. She has our parents' generous heart and our Grandma Ruth's determination." Emily wiped away a tear that insisted on escaping. "Barbara, my decision to leave everything to the senior home isn't a punishment for you. It's because I know you've built a prosperous and independent life, while the seniors at the home depend on this help to have dignity in their final years. You are strong and capable. They are vulnerable and need protection." Barbara stopped reading for a moment, clearly too emotional to continue. Mrs. Dorothy offered to finish. "But there's something I kept in the safe, especially for you, sister. In the folder, you'll find the deed to the house where we lived with our parents. 2 weeks before passing, I transferred it to your name. The house is yours by right and by love. I hope one day you'll visit it and remember the happy moments we shared there." Barbara let the paper fall and covered her face with her hands, sobbing openly. "She forgave me," she whispered through tears. "After everything I did, she still forgave me." Emily rose from her chair and walked over to Barbara. Without saying a word, she hugged her aunt for the first time in her life. "My mother always said family isn't just who you're born with, but who chooses to stay together," Emily said softly. "Maybe it's not too late for us to choose that." Richard watched the scene with growing discomfort. His case had turned into a family reunion, and he was clearly out of place. "Well," he said, trying to regain some control of the situation, "if the parties have reached an agreement, I believe my services are no longer needed." "Actually," said Barbara, separating from Emily's embrace, "your services were never needed, Richard. You sold me the idea that I was entitled to something that was never mine to begin with." "I was just following your legal instructions," Richard defended himself. "Your instructions were to win at any cost," Barbara said firmly. "You went so far as to question the mental sanity of a woman who just passed away and the credibility of an orphaned child. That goes far beyond legal representation." The judge spoke up. "Mr. Richard, I must say some of your methods during this hearing were questionable from an ethical standpoint. I suggest you reflect on how you handle your cases in the future." Richard gathered his papers quickly. "If you'll excuse me, I have other commitments," he said, clearly embarrassed. "Of course," said Barbara. "But before you go, I want you to know I won't be paying your fees for this case. Consider this a lesson in choosing your clients and methods more carefully." Richard left the room without looking back, leaving a relieved silence for everyone present. Mrs. Dorothy broke the silence. "Well, now that we've resolved the legal matter, we need to think about what's best for Emily." "What do you mean?" asked the girl. "Sweetheart, you need a legal guardian. Sarah named me as your temporary guardian, but this needs to be formalized by the court." Barbara turned to Emily. "I would really like to get to know you better. I'm not asking to replace your mother. No one could ever do that. But I'd like the chance to be the aunt I should have been from the beginning. And I'd like to get to know you too," replied Emily. "But I don't want to leave the senior home. Mrs. Dorothy and the grandpas there are my family too." "No one is talking about taking you away from the senior home," said Mrs. Dorothy, smiling. "But maybe we can find a way for you to have both an aunt and a pretend grandma, don't you think?" The judge smiled too. "I believe we can arrange a shared guardianship. Emily would primarily stay with Mrs. Dorothy, but would have regular visits with Barbara. This way she maintains her current stability, but can also develop family bonds." "That would be perfect," said Emily, smiling for the first time since she had entered the courtroom that morning. 2 weeks later, the shared guardianship papers were formalized. Emily continued living in the small but cozy apartment that Mrs. Dorothy maintained at the back of the senior home, but now spent every Saturday with Barbara. The first visit was awkward for both. Barbara had prepared an overly elaborate lunch, trying to impress. Emily was shy, unsure how to act in her aunt's luxurious house. "You know what?" said Barbara after half an hour of forced conversation. "How about we forget this fancy lunch and order a pizza? Your mother always said I was a terrible cook anyway." Emily laughed, and the tension finally began to dissipate. In the following weeks, they developed a comfortable routine. Barbara discovered she had a knack for helping Emily with math, while the girl helped her understand basic technology, like using the cell phone and computer. "How do you remember so many things?" asked Barbara one Saturday, while Emily helped her organize the documents for her pharmacies. "I don't know," replied Emily, shrugging. "My mother said it was a gift, that some people are born with special abilities to help others. And you use this ability to help at the senior home." "Yes, I do. Many grandpas have memory problems, so I tell them stories about their own lives. When they remember something, I store it in my memory to tell back to them when they forget again." Barbara stopped organizing the papers and looked at her niece with admiration. "Your mother was right. You truly are a gift." At the senior home, Emily had become an even more special presence after the trial. Her story had spread among the residents, and many came to talk with her about their own families and memories. Mrs. Dorothy watched with pride as the girl brought joy to the elderly. On Sundays, Emily organized shared memories sessions where each elderly person would tell a story from their youth, and she would repeat it word for word the following week for anyone who wanted to hear it again. "That girl has a heart of gold," commented Mr. Anthony, an 82-year-old gentleman who always perked up when Emily arrived. "She reminds me of my granddaughter who lives far away." "To me, she's like a great-granddaughter," said Mrs. Catherine, who was 75. "Always patient, always smiling, even when I tell the same story 10 times. The impact of Sarah's inheritance on the home was transformative. With the resources she left behind, Mrs. Dorothy was able to renovate the facilities, hire more staff, and offer activities that were previously impossible. "You know, Emily," Mrs. Dorothy said one afternoon as they walked through the newly renovated garden, "your mother planned all this down to the smallest detail. She knew exactly how the money should be used." "How do you know?" "Because she left detailed instructions along with the letter. She specified that part should go to renovations, part to hiring staff, part to recreational activities, and even a part for residents' medical emergencies." Emily smiled. "My mother was always very organized. And very wise. She also left a special fund for your education, did you know?" "What do you mean?" "There's enough money for you to study at any university you want when the time comes. Your mother wanted to make sure your intelligence would be put to good use." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. 3 months after the trial, Emily was helping Mrs. Dorothy organize a birthday party for Mr. Joseph, who was turning 90, when Barbara arrived with a surprise. "I brought someone to meet you," she said with a mysterious smile. Behind her was a man of about 40, tall with graying hair, wearing simple but clean clothes. There was something familiar about his brown eyes. "Emily," Barbara said softly, "this is Jack Miller. He is your biological father." Emily felt the world spin around her. In all these months, she had never thought about the possibility of meeting her biological family. My father." Jack approached hesitantly, his eyes moist. "Hi, Emily. You've grown so much. You're so beautiful. How did you find me?" "Actually," Barbara said, "he found me. Jack saw the report about the trial in the local newspaper and contacted me." Jack knelt to be at eye level with Emily. "Daughter, I know I have no right to show up in your life after so long, but when I saw your photo in the paper and read about how you defended the memory of the woman who raised you, I knew I had to at least try to explain why I wasn't there." "Did you abandon me when I was little?" Emily asked directly. Jack sighed deeply. "Not exactly. Your biological mother, Susan, left me when you were 2. She said she didn't want to be a mother anymore, that she wasn't born for it. She took you away one night while I was at work. And why didn't you look for me? I did look. I searched for months. I went to the police, hired a private detective who devoured all my savings, but Susan had completely disappeared. Years later, I found out she had left you at the health clinic and disappeared again. Mrs. Dorothy approached and put her hand on Emily's shoulder. Dear, you don't need to decide anything right now. How about we all talk together, calmly? They sat in the home's living room. Jack told his story in detail. He explained that he had worked as a mechanic for years, saving money to continue searching for Emily. When he finally managed to track her to the health clinic, he discovered she had been adopted, but the records were sealed. I could have gone to court to try to break the confidentiality, he said, but I spoke with a social worker who explained that you were happy and well cared for. She said that trying to take you away from a loving family just to ease my conscience would be selfish. So you gave up? I didn't give up. I kept following from afar. I found out you had been adopted by a good and dedicated nurse. I felt at ease knowing you were in good hands. But I never stopped thinking about you. Emily processed the information in silence. Her organized mind was trying to fit this new information into everything she knew about her life. Why did you decide to show up now? Because when I saw how you defended your adoptive mother in court, I realized you had grown up strong and brave. I saw you were no longer a fragile child who could be hurt by the truth and, he hesitated, because I'm not in good health. What do you mean? Barbara stepped forward. Jack told me he was diagnosed with a heart condition. Nothing serious yet, but it requires treatment. He wanted to meet you before it was too late. Emily looked at Jack with new eyes. Now she understood where her brown eyes came from, and perhaps even her special memory. Do you also have a good memories? She asked. Jack smiled for the first time. Yes, I do. I remember every moment I spent with you when you were a baby. I remember the first time you said, Daddy. I remember the songs I sang to put you to sleep. I thought it was normal until I saw your story in the newspaper and realized it might be a family trait. What songs? Little Fish was your favorite. You always asked, again, Daddy, again. Emily felt a strange warmth in her chest. She didn't consciously remember, but something about that information sounded familiar and comforting. Can you sing it? Jack looked around somewhat awkwardly, but seeing the encouraging faces of Barbara and Mrs. Dorothy, he began to sing softly, How can a little fish live out of the cold water? Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. She couldn't explain why, but that voice, that melody, awakened something very deep in her memory. I remember, she whispered. I don't know how, but I remember that voice. Jack stopped singing, also emotional. You really remember? I remember someone singing to me when I was scared. I remember big, gentle hands calming me down. I always thought it was just a dream. Father and daughter looked at each other in silence, recognizing something familiar in each other despite the years of separation. What happens now? Asked Emily. That depends on you, said Jack. I didn't come here to disrupt your life. You have a family that loves you, you have a home, you have your studies. I just wanted you to know that there's a father who never stopped thinking about you. And if I want to get to know you better, I would be very happy, but on your time, in your way. No pressure, no rush. Mrs. Dorothy intervened gently. How about we start slowly? Jack could come visit on Sunday when Barbara also comes. That way Emily feels comfortable and we can all get to know each other better. That would be good, agreed Emily. But I have one condition. What? Asked Jack and Barbara at the same time. You need to get treatment. If you're really my father, then you need to take care of your health so you can stick around longer. Jack laughed, a mixture of joy and surprise. You're just like your adoptive mother, always thinking of others first. Barbara will help you with the treatment costs, said Emily decisively. She has money and your family now too. Barbara raised her eyebrows, surprised by her niece's determination. Emily, you can't decide that for me. Yes, I can. You said you wanted to be a real aunt. Aunts help family when someone's in need. Barbara looked at Jack, then at Emily, and finally smiled. You're right. Of course I'll help with the treatment. After all, If you're my niece and he's your father, then he's family too." Jack was clearly moved. "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity," interrupted Emily. "It's family taking care of family. My mother always said that's what we do for each other." In that moment, Mrs. Dorothy realized she was witnessing something special. Emily had lost a mother, but was building a support network that included a repentant aunt, a rediscovered father, and a grandmother figure who loved her unconditionally. Sundays at the senior home became even more special. Jack would bring his guitar and play old songs that made the seniors reminisce about their youth. Barbara began helping with educational activities, discovering she had a talent for teaching math not only to Emily, but also to other young people in the community. "You know what amazes me most?" said Mrs. Dorothy to Emily one day, while they watched Jack teaching guitar chords to her Anthony. "How your mother managed to foresee that you would need all of us." "How so?" "She knew you would find your aunt, knew your father would appear one day, knew the senior home would be your foundation. It's as if she orchestrated everything so you would never be alone." Emily thought about this for a moment. "I think my mother knew my heart better than I did. She knew I would need many people to be happy, not just one." 6 months after the trial, Golden Year's senior home was unrecognizable. The renovations funded by Sarah's inheritance had transformed the place into a true refuge for seniors. There was a physical therapy room, a library, a garden with vegetable plots where residents grew herbs and vegetables, and even a small interfaith chapel. Emily had become the unofficial star of the place. Her extraordinary memory was used not only for entertainment, but also for practical purposes. She memorized each resident's medications, their appointment schedules, their food preferences, and even the names and birthdays of all their family members. "This girl is a gift from God," Mrs. Catherine would say whenever someone visited the home. "She knows more about my family than I do sometimes." One day, a team of journalists came to do a story about the home and met Emily. The reporter, a woman named Jennifer Parker, was impressed by the girl's story. "Emily," she said after turning off the cameras, "have you ever thought about using your special memory to help people beyond the home's residents?" "How do you mean?" "There are many families who lose contact with each other, people who have been searching for relatives for years. Your ability could help reunite separated families." The idea intrigued Emily. She discussed the possibility with Mrs. Dorothy, Barbara, and Jack. "It's a big responsibility," said Jack. "You're still very young to carry the weight of so many people's stories." "But it's also an opportunity to honor your mother's memory," said Barbara. "She always used her gifts to help others." "What does your heart tell you?" asked Mrs. Dorothy, ever wise. "I feel like I want to try," replied Emily, "but slowly, one family at a time." Thus began a special project. Once a month, Emily would receive at the home a family searching for lost relatives. She would listen to their stories, memorize every detail, and then use her network of contacts, which included not only the families of the home's residents, but also patients from the hospital where Sarah worked, to try to find clues. The first case was that of Mrs. Vivian, a 70-year-old woman searching for a brother who had disappeared 50 years earlier. Emily Johnson memorized every detail that Mrs. Vivian remembered: her brother's full name, the city where they were born, their parents' names, physical characteristics, childhood nicknames. It took 3 weeks, but Emily managed to track down the brother through a chain of acquaintances. He was alive, living in a neighboring town, and had also been searching for his sister for decades. The reunion took place at the senior home, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room when the siblings embraced after half a century apart. "How did you manage it?" asked Mrs. Vivian's brother, an elderly gentleman named Marvin. "My mother always said that people leave traces wherever they go," explained Emily. "Sometimes we just need to follow those traces with patience and care." The story of the reunion spread through the town, and soon Emily was receiving requests for help from families throughout the region. She established one rule: she would only take one case per month to avoid becoming overwhelmed, and all reunions would take place at the senior home, so the elderly residents could also share in the joy. "This place is becoming a center for miracles," commented the local church priest, who began visiting the home to bless the family reunions. 1 year after the trial, Emily was helping Mrs. Dorothy prepare a special celebration. It was the one-year anniversary of Sarah's inheritance, and they wanted to celebrate everything that had been accomplished. "You know, dear," said Mrs. Dorothy as they decorated the main hall, "your mother would be so proud seeing all this." "I still miss her sometimes," admitted Emily, "especially when something important happens, and I want to tell her about it." "But you do tell her. Every time you use your gifts to help someone, every time you show love and generosity, you're telling her, and I'm sure she's listening." The party was a success. All the residents of the home were present. Barbara, Jack, several families Emily had helped reunite, staff from the hospital where Sarah had worked, and even Judge Margaret, who had become a family friend. During the party, Barbara stood up to make a speech. "1 year ago, I walked into a courtroom thinking only about money. I was blinded by greed and resentment, but an 11-year-old girl taught me that the true inheritance isn't the material possessions we leave behind, but the love and kindness we spread in the world." She turned to Emily. "My niece, you haven't just honored your mother's memory. You've multiplied the love she planted. Every family you've reunited, every smile you've brought to the residents of this home, every moment of joy you've created is an extension of Sarah's legacy." Jack joined Barbara. "Emily, when I thought I had lost you forever, I resigned myself. But your adoptive mother taught me, through you, that it's never too late to reconnect with those we love, that it's never too late to be a real family." Mrs. Dorothy also stood up. "And I learned that sometimes God sends us angels disguised as 11-year-old children to remind us what really matters in life." Emily was clearly emotional, but also radiant with happiness. "I just want to say," she began, "that my mother always taught me that alone we are strong, but together we are invincible. And looking at all of you here today, I know she was right." Judge Margaret approached. "Emily, there's something I want to tell you. That day in the courtroom, when you recited the letter from memory, I was impressed. But what really struck me was your maturity and your generosity. You could have used your situation to gain sympathy or to attack those who were wronging you, but you chose the path of forgiveness and unity. My mother always said that holding on to anger is like holding a hot coal, hoping you'll get to throw it at someone. You're the one who gets burned. A wise woman, your mother, and she raised an even wiser daughter." As the party continued, Emily observed all the important people in her life interacting. Barbara was chatting animatedly with Grandma Catherine about old recipes. Jack was teaching guitar chords to some younger residents. Mrs. Dorothy was giving out hugs and smiles to everyone. It was exactly how her mother had dreamed. A big, chosen family, united not by blood, but by love and mutual care. 2 hours later, when guests started leaving, Emily went to the room Sarah had prepared for her at the back of the senior home. It was a simple but cozy space with a single bed, a desk where she did her homework, and a bookshelf full of books. On the wall was a photo of Sarah smiling, taken during the last Christmas they spent together. Next to the photo, Emily had pasted all the thank you letters she received from the families she helped reunite. "Hi, Mum," she said to the photo, as she did every night. "Today was a very good day. I think you'd be happy to see how everything has grown." She sat on the bed and picked up a notebook where she wrote her daily reflections. "Today marks 1 year since you passed away," she wrote, "and I finally understand why you made all those choices. You weren't just taking care of me or the grandpas at the home. You were planting seeds of love that continue growing to this day." Barbara is no longer that bitter woman who showed up in court. She discovered that caring for others brings more happiness than just thinking about herself. Jack is healthy and happy, playing guitar for the grandpas and teaching me to play too. Mrs. Dorothy continues to be the best makeshift grandma anyone could have. And me? I'm learning that having a special memory isn't just for storing information. It's for storing love, for preserving important stories, for connecting people who got lost along the way. You always said I was a gift. Today I understand that the gift wasn't just for you. It was for all the people I would meet and help throughout my life. Emily closed the notebook and got ready to sleep. Through the window, she could see the lights of the senior home's garden, where some residents were still chatting, enjoying the pleasant night. It was a vision of peace and harmony that her mother had made possible with her generosity and careful planning. and Emily knew it was her responsibility to continue caring for this legacy. The next day was Monday, and she had school. After class, she would help Mrs. Dorothy with the senior home's administration. On Saturday, she would visit Barbara, who was teaching her to cook the recipes she learned from their mother. On Sunday, Jack would come to play guitar and tell stories from when she was a baby. It was a full life, rich with meaningful relationships and purpose, exactly as Sarah had dreamed for her adoptive daughter. Before sleeping, Emily said her nightly prayer. "Thank you, God, for giving me the best mother in the world, even if for a short time. Thank you for helping me find my family again. And thank you for giving me a special memory so I can help other people find their families too." And so, surrounded by the love of her chosen family, Emily slept peacefully, knowing she was honoring the greatest legacy anyone can leave: a generous heart and a life dedicated to the good of others. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this touching story about Emily and her journey in court. Do you believe the girl made the right choices by forgiving and reuniting her family? Leave your sincere comments about what moved you most in this narrative. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.